Welcome to the Friendly Moms Club. I'm Jen.
I'm Karlee, and we're the new mom friends you didn't know you needed. Happy Mom Day, Jen.
Happy Mom Day, Karlee.
We are back in action in our studio, aka my living room.
Karlee's house. Yep.
We're doing a little filming.
Yeah. I'm like half here, and you already should know why. So just take everything I say. If I need to pause a little bit, or I sound funny, or like mama and pregnancy brain are acting, just bear with me a little bit today.
Yeah, you get the double whammy there.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
That's rough.
Yeah.
I was like legitimately not all there when I was pregnant. Like it really struggled.
It's a real thing. I thought like mom brain, people are just use it as an excuse. They forget things. But now that I've done it, I realize it's a very true thing. And when you're pregnant, like pregnancy brain is a thing.
Oh my gosh, so
then
hard.
a double whammy. When you get pregnant this close together, I guess that's I did this to myself.
The babies just suck it out of you.
Yeah.
Even mom brain. I really struggle with like word retrieval. Like I can never think of the word. I'll say to my husband, that thing that washes the dishes. And he's like, the dishwasher? I'm like, yes, that thing. Yeah. But I like cannot
when it's on the tip of your tongue too, and you know it, and it just doesn't, it's not coming to your mouth.
Yeah, it concerns me about going back to work because I don't know if I'm going to be able to actually speak to people.
Yeah, I know.
We'll see.
Well, today we're talking about a fun topic. It's
boobies.
I don't know. Yeah, it's just like one of those things that I was very wrong. Everything I thought about breastfeeding and what I thought it would be like was very different than my experience. So I always just have to laugh. Like I was very naive when it came to breastfeeding. So. And we'll get into why.
It was hard. I even, like, part of my work is helping people establish breastfeeding. And I'd seen so many of my friends struggle. And I, like, in my head, I knew how hard it was going to be. And I still, nothing can prepare you. It's like the lack of sleep. Nothing can prepare you for how hard it can be. Not everybody has this experience. Some people, it's just easy breezy. It just happens. And
that's what I thought it was like. Yeah. I was very naive. And I just thought, like, baby comes, you put them on the boob and you can breastfeed. I just naively thought everyone could do it. Everyone always had a milk supply, like enough of a milk supply, like no problems latching. I just thought all of that was just like, oh, it's just natural. It's just going to happen. It's just going to work. Like that's truly what I thought. So I got a big
surprise.
What's the word? Wake up call.
Yeah. Like, I don't know what the word is. I don't know words. Words are not my thing.
Wake up call.
And it's also two ways. Like it's a skill you're learning and your body has to do it. And then also baby has to be able to do it. And there's so many factors on both sides of that, which we're going to talk about today. So today is actually about our experiences breastfeeding. So we're not going to be talking about like how to, there'll be no demos. I mean, we could. The child's asleep.
Mine are all dried up. So I can't demo anything. But
you can still demo a lot with dried up boobies.
But we are going to talk all about, we had very different experiences. So it'll be interesting to kind of hear what we both thought and what happened in our journeys. So
definitely.
We will start. I will ask you the first question, Karlee.
Perfect.
So what was your plan? So when you were pregnant, like what was your plan for breastfeeding?
Yeah. So people always like when they're like, oh, I just like want to be a mom. I like never really had that. Like I knew I wanted to be a mom, but it wasn't like my life's passion. Like it wasn't something I always looked forward to or wanted. But when I thought about being a mom, one thing that always came up for me was that I really wanted to breastfeed. And I don't even, I mean, like I know like society like makes us think like you have to, but I don't even know what it was because I do feel very strongly that like you feed your baby however you need to. And I was very open to using formula. I was very open to bottles and alternative feeding. Like I never felt like I had to, but it was something that like deep down I really wanted to do. To me, it was just high on the priority list for me. There's a lot of things in the newborn days that like, like newborn photos, I don't, but I really wanted to breastfeed. So that was my plan. What about you? What was your plan, Jen, for breastfeeding? We wrote here during pregnancy, but I think just in general in life, like what was your plan?
I mean, I just thought everyone breastfeeds. Like I just really naively, and like I saw my sister go through this and not being able to breastfeed. So I know that not everyone can. I don't know why I thought it was just going to be.
Did she struggle with
easier?
it? Yeah. And what about your mom?
I don't remember about my mom. Yeah. I just know my sister did. But then we haven't talked about this, but my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer a few months postpartum after having her baby. And that likely was the reason why she couldn't breastfeed. So we didn't have the same thing. Hers was likely due to breast cancer, which we should talk about one day because she just thought she had clogged milk ducts, and that's what the lump was in her breast. So we should talk about that one day because it's very good to know. But I just thought I would breastfeed. That was just the plan. I didn't have any strong feelings for it. I just thought I would. That was it.
Yeah, that was that.
There was not much to it. I just thought, cool, I'm going to try. If it works, great. If not, I'll feed formula.
Yeah.
Like, cool. I really didn't have strong feelings anyway.
One thing I do want to add that was a priority for me because I struggle with anxiety. I didn't want to be, it was a priority for me that baby could take a bottle. However I ended up feeding baby, I mentally could not handle the pressure of being the only one being able to feed baby, because I was like, what if I have a breakdown and need a nap? That was a priority for me. And I remember saying to my husband that if I can make adequate breast milk, I would rather exclusively pump. Oh, I lost a nail. Darn. I would rather pump and give bottles than only breastfeed and not give bottles. And that was something we talked about before, because for mental health reasons, that was a priority to me. Where some people are the opposite. They don't want to give a bottle because they don't want to have to pump and give bottles if baby preferred that. But
mental health is important. And as we're going to get into, breastfeeding is hard, and it is hard on your mental health, especially if it's not working easily.
That's something actually the psychiatrist I worked with when pregnant, she did mention, I will support you in breastfeeding how I can, but I need you to go into it without being attached to the idea that it has to work. And she asked me what's your plan for feeding, and recommended, before I even told her my plan, it's good to have a loose plan because it doesn't always go the way you want it. And then when you're also trying to prioritize your mental health, it's very hard to have a rigid plan for breastfeeding as well.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
If that's somewhere that you're coming from, definitely something to consider.
Yeah, and something you can talk to your therapist about. If you are pregnant, that's a good thing to talk about, is because there's a lot of pressure and stigma towards breastfeeding. And you don't realize, I think all the hormones too, once baby's here, you feel even more pressure to do things a certain way, and that society is judging you, and you just feel all of these, what your partner's saying, what your family's saying, what your friends are doing. You feel all these pressures from all these different places that it's good. If you have a plan and can talk it out beforehand with your spouse and your therapist, it might be a good thing to do. But let's get into preparation. So how else did you prepare for breastfeeding?
So one of them, I discussed the feeding plan with my partner. We also talked about it with my psychiatrist. I also became familiar with my pump before birth. So I sterilized all the parts, got everything ready, figured out how to use it, made sure it actually worked. And then one thing that my midwife encouraged was antenatal hand expression. So hand expression is just when you squeeze out a little bit of the colostrum with your hands. And she gave me some little syringes, and I think they would normally do a demo. It's something I was familiar with from work, but she recommended I started, I think either 36 or 30, I think it was 36 weeks. She said I could, but always check with your doctor or midwife, because some people are not candidates for this if you have any risks in your pregnancy. And she just said anecdotally, in her experience, she was seeing less post-term or post-due date induction. So less people going over their due date and needing an induction if they were doing some hand expression. And I was like, cool. If I don't have to be pregnant for 41 and a half weeks, that would be great.
In this summer heat?
Yes. Yep. So I did that, and I actually was really, really enjoyed it and got a good little stash, but that doesn't happen to everybody. And also, if you aren't able to get a stash, it's not actually an indication of breastfeeding success. So some people, their bodies just don't make very much colostrum. Some people leak like crazy from 20 weeks. So that's important to note. It can be very helpful, and Jen's going to talk about it as well. There's lots of ways it can help, but you also don't have to. It was just, Oh, and then another thing I did in the house was I set up pumping and breastfeeding stations. So I had one of those little white trolley thingies. I think it's from IKEA.
The 3 shelf carts.
There's a name. Utility cart.
Yes.
One of those, and I put all my pump stuff. I put stuff for breastfeeding, snacks, nipple balm.
Snacks are very important. Snacks and water bottles
snacks
should
and
always
water bottles,
be beside
lots
you.
of snacks. Hand sanitizer, a bunch of stuff. And I had a bunch of those all over the house, the bedroom, by the couch. I don't even know what else.
Well, the last thing you want to do when you sit down to pump is have to be oh, I forgot this, and have to get up and do it. And so if it's set up in multiple locations, it's
handy.
Yeah.
So what about you, Jen? What did you do to prepare for breastfeeding?
I went to Belly's Community that we've talked about before, and they actually had a lactation consultant come in. And so it was a 2-hour, I think, free kind of workshopping class with her. And she had a little
the boob, the knit boob.
The crocheted boob that she showed, hand expression and the benefits of hand expression, and kind of, just
how to do it.
tips on breastfeeding, and they were very big into it's okay if it doesn't happen. Like,
that's good.
They did not push that you had to breastfeed at all. They just were there to support you. And
because sometimes when people are really passionate about breastfeeding, they can be very like, you got to do it. You got to do it.
Yes. and I did not feel that
help.
at all. But
I
felt I learned so much.
That's
like
good.
Poor little naive me was just like, my eyes were forced to open up and be like, wow, there's a lot more to this that I didn't know.
There's lots.
And so after this, I researched a bit more into hand expression, because to me, this whole idea of like, touching my boobs and like manipulating them and to get milk out to feed my baby was still a bit weird in my brain. Like it didn't seem natural to me. And it's one of the most natural things in the world.
But not in our society.
In my mind, yes. But in my mind, there was just a weird connection to it. And like, I just wasn't comfortable, like feeling my boobs, and doing hand expression was very uncomfortable for me in the beginning. So I did it, and I really didn't harvest any colostrum, but it helped me prepare just because I felt way more comfortable with knowing how to hand express. Like there's a little bit of a method to the madness of how you squeeze and in what direction, and
definitely.
And
every breast is different. So what works for some people won't work for others.
You have to get used to how it's going to work for you and what that looks like. And if you can kind of figure that out before you're trying to latch baby and hand express, it makes a big difference. Like if you're already comfortable with that, once baby's here, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable whipping out the boob and trying to get the baby on. And because sometimes you need to hand express while the baby's latching too. Like so anyways, it really helped a lot. So I had to force myself. I set a timer on my phone that would go off, and I'd be like, okay, it's time for me to go do some hand expression. I'd lock myself in my room and like, okay, like I didn't even want my husband there. I was like, this is just weird. I need to do this on my own. But by the time the baby was here, I was much more comfortable with it.
That's good. You felt like you actually became more comfortable handling your breasts?
Yes. Yeah. So it was worth it. So between the class and doing some research on my own and kind of just being comfortable, like working my boobs and how it's going to work. And yeah, like I said, I didn't really collect a lot of colostrum. I got the syringes off Amazon and I was ready, and nothing really came out, like the odd drop, but not enough to actually harvest. Yeah. But it
helped when you actually
helped me know what to do and how it's going to work.
Definitely. So because right after having a baby is the last time you want to be trying to learn a new skill, and breastfeeding is a skill for you and baby. So from like my nursing perspective, it's very hard when patients come in and you can tell they've never touched their breast. They're very uncomfortable even having them out, which is fair. I understand that. Yeah. But they're trying to learn how to hold their baby, and newborns are kind of hard to hold. They got all these wobbly bits, and then they're also trying to learn how to touch their own breasts and how to move them, and they don't even really know like what their nipples look like and
what they look like normally, because they'll change in pregnancy, and it's good to know the differences. What they look like normally, are they inflamed? Like, can you tell that they're cracking? Like, if you've never looked at them before, you're not going to have a good idea of what's abnormal or normal now.
And that's another thing too, preparing for breastfeeding. If you do have flat or inverted nipples, you can actually see a lactation consultant when you're pregnant, and they can actually help you with everting the nipple. Because inverted nipples is one of the structural things that can really affect breastfeeding. You don't need these big honking nipples to breastfeed, but if it's inverted, it can be very painful for you, and it can be very difficult for baby, but you can be successful in breastfeeding, and lactation consultants can be so helpful in getting you prepared. But this is best dealt with actually when you're pregnant. And you don't even have to have inverted nipples to see a LC when you're pregnant. Yeah. If you just want help getting comfortable with your breasts, and
super knowledgeable,
something like bellies isn't available, then definitely something to consider.
Yeah. There's so much more we could talk about breastfeeding, but today is more about our experiences. So we'll try to stay on track about that. So, okay. So what did feeding look like for you, Karlee, when you were actually in the hospital? Like those first, 48, 72 hours when you're there.
So the first night, Henry had we'll talk about this in our birth episode, but he had a very fast and slightly traumatic delivery for him. He ended up having a vacuum, and it was just all very fast. So I think he kind of came out like, wow, what's going on? And he also, he had what's that thing? A suction, a deep suction. So I think his mouth was sore, his head was sore. So he didn't really have much interest in feeding in the first night. So we did a lot of snuggling. I did some hand expression and just put drops into his mouth. And then at 12 hours, when he was 12 hours old, he actually went to NICU for low blood sugars. So when he was in NICU, trying to get him to latch while he had all these tubes and wires, he had a tube in his nose, and then he had all the monitors on him. And the NICU in the hospital that I was in is so busy. You don't have a private room. The next patient is like literally you can like hold hands with them. They're right there. So there's no privacy, and it's just like it's loud. So it's very, very difficult. And I find it so overstimulating to try to latch him in there because he was mad. He was like screaming, and like there was no calm, like womb-like environment. There was none of that. So it was very traumatizing to me trying to latch him in there because he was so unhappy. So at that point, my husband and I decided, you know what, our priority right now is just making sure he's getting fed. I did harvest a lot of colostrum when I was pregnant. So I was like, we have all of that. So let's bring that. He went home and got it. And then I'm just going to pump every time he takes a bottle, and we'll do that. And then when we go home and he's more settled, then we'll work on latching. So in the hospital, the lactation consultant came to see us to help and just kind of like make sure we were on the right track, make sure I was pumping properly, the right time, the right length, like right frequency, all of that. And then we just did lots of skin to skin, and he ended up getting bottles in NICU. And then he also had a few feeds in the tube that from his nose to his tummy when he didn't want to take a bottle, but he had to eat because of his blood sugars. And then, we worked on it when we got home.
Oh, good.
Yeah. What about you? What did feeding look like for you in the hospital?
Well, it was kind of a journey. She just latching wasn't hard, but it wasn't totally easy either. Like there was a little bit of work
for you.
For her.
Yeah.
I was much more comfortable with my boobs at this point, so that was fine. She was getting on, and I thought she was latching okay, but it just didn't look like really anything was coming out. Like I couldn't see anything coming out. It just didn't see. So looked like she was working really hard, and just nothing was happening. And I was hand expressing, and nothing was really happening. And then, so we tried this every couple hours, like we kept trying, and then she ended up losing too much weight. So they basically said she was at the benchmark, that if she lost any more weight, they wouldn't let us go home, and that we had to give her formula, was basically what we were told. There wasn't any options. There was
Which is very annoying.
no lactation consultant support. Like we weren't offered any support. The nurses basically just said like, yeah, you're doing great, is what I was told. Like I basically was told I was doing great, but she was lost all this weight, and they told us we couldn't go home. Like it was just all very stressful. It did not go great. We ended up just having to give formula in the hospital so that we could get discharged to come home. So it didn't really go great, and we just had to give formula. So
sounds like you didn't have very much support with feeding in the hospital, which is sad, but I also understand because the hospitals are so busy.
Yes.
But it also highlights the importance of preparing yourself and your plan, which you did, but you did need that support from them to kind of help close the gap and bring it all together.
I was not good at advocating for myself.
Yeah.
Like I know this pregnancy, like this birth, I think will be very different because I'm going to know a lot more questions to ask, things I can ask for, what I'm actually like rightfully entitled to, like things I can actually ask for that should be available. Hopefully I'll be better this time around. Sure.
Also frustrating, they said your only option was to give formula. Yes. Formula is a fantastic option, but it's not the only option. Yes. So there are other things. Yeah. That's frustrating.
But I also, in the back of my head, I had already made a lactation consultant appointment for someone to come to my house. I think it was 2 days after we were set to come home. So, 4 days after the baby is born, I knew I had someone coming to my house. So I was also like,
had some support.
I have support coming, so you just want to get home. You don't want to be in a hospital. You just want to go home with your baby.
Get me out of here.
So I was like, you know what? Whatever I need to do to get out of the hospital, then I'll work on it with a lactation consultant. So
for sure,
which we can talk about next. So what about the first week? So once you're actually home, were you able to get some quality time to work on it?
We did. Once he got all the tubes and wires, we set up camp on our living room. And at first, we did a lot of bottle feeding. So I was pumping around the clock. Every time he took a bottle, I would pump. I was very lucky to have a really good supply even in the beginning. So I had like the element of supply was kind of removed from the equation. But latching took a long time. So in that first week, he would kind of latch a little bit here or there, not super productive at it. I don't even know when it was. At some point in the first week, my midwife, who's also a lactation consultant, she got me using a nipple shield to kind of help with the transition from bottles just to breast. And that was very helpful. And near the end of the first week, he was actually latching properly with the nipple shield, but we weren't using that as like our main feeding. We were doing the bottle, and then usually I would kind of like bring him for a cuddle and he would latch a little bit because by that point he was like settled and not so hungry. Sometimes I would try to do a little bit of latching and then give him the bottle, but sometimes he was hungry, he was mad. So it was hard. Lots of pumping. and breast milk by bottle kind of around the clock. But it was good because my husband got to help out so much. So we, and like the first few nights, we would both get up and I'd pump on the couch and he would sit there and give Henry his bottle, and then we'd go to bed together. That lasted a few nights, and then we started taking turns. Yeah, which we knew, but like the first few nights, like it was exciting. Like we were having fun. We'd like sit and eat cookies. I actually have a really good picture that I'll post of us sitting and like hanging out, probably eating some lasagna or something at 3 a.m. It was great.
I know, because you enjoy it. And then then the tiredness sets in.
Yeah, and then we're like, okay.
The adrenaline of like those first couple days, right?
And we're like, now we need to divide and conquer.
Yes.
And what about you, Jen? What did breastfeeding the first week at home look like?
So the first couple days I don't really remember until the lactation consultant came. I think we were just mostly formula and like trying to latch, but again, it didn't really seem like anything was coming out, and I was just really banking on I need support, and like I can't wait for her to come. And honestly, it was like, I just love her. I still feel this strong connection to her because I feel like she was like that saving grace, like when I needed help and I was so desperate and so confused. So when she like came in the door, I was just like, I felt immediately more at peace with everything because I had this really good support system coming to help. And my husband was there. She was very
supportive as well.
She was phenomenal.
And not preachy.
And my husband was there, and so she really talked about feeding, and we talked about latch, and she's like, I really think that she's latching, like it looks like she's latching okay. And we talked a lot about hand expression, but we ended up having to do triple feeding. So, which basically means in the shortened form that I would breastfeed as much as I could, 20-ish minutes aside, see how much we could get out. Then after that, so after like 40 minutes, then I'd pass her off to an ad who would give her formula or pumped milk. The first time there's no pumped milk. After that, there's pumped milk. Mm-hmm. So he'd be giving her a bottle, and then I would pump. And I would pump for another 20 minutes and see what I could get.
I'm tired just listening to that.
So really, you're supposed to do this every 2 to 3 hours, but that whole process took over an hour and a half to do that one triple feeding. So we got like half an hour, 45 minutes till we were like, well, got to do it again. And I was so lucky to have my spouse there because otherwise I would have had to do the bottle and then I would have had to pump. So it would have given me like another 15, 20 minute chore to do in between there.
And there's the cleaning.
And it was,
and then the baby, they need stuff too.
We tracked everything, like obsessive compulsive, like sheet with all the lines, like all these like lines. We had all these charts, and it was date, time, left side, right side, what side I pumped, how much I pumped for the time, how much they were getting. And like, it was just insane. And so the first week was just the most chaotic, exhausting thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah. But you made it through.
Yeah.
It sounds like for baby number 2, you're going to have to download the Huckleberry app. Did I tell you about that app? Fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope it's
yeah.
I'm just hoping it's a bit easier. Yeah. But at least we know. We know a lot more about it. So
you do. You're not more prepared because you were prepared, but you have real life experience now going into it.
Yes.
Okay. Question 5.
So then, so now, so that was the first week we talked about. So what about after that? So for those first like few months, how did your, the progression happen for you?
We had a lot of struggle. It was struggle city over here. Yeah. Like I said, supply, very thankful I didn't have to struggle with. So even from the beginning, I could be a little bit more loose with, like I wasn't tied to my pump. I didn't have to pump every 3 hours on the dot to make sure I made enough, which was very helpful. At night, sometimes I would do like a 4-hour stretch so that I could have a little bit more sleep. But the first month or so, we just really struggled to get the latching down. It was uncomfortable for me. My nipples were like flattened, like pinched when he came off. Oh. He was spitting up a lot. He was coughing a lot. So then we did notice, like literally the second he came out, that he had a tongue tie. It was like very visible. And that's just when the skin under your tongue, the frenulum, is a little bit restricted. But we didn't know if it actually was affecting breastfeeding or if he was just like taking a while to kind of get used to it. So we did take him into a pediatric dentist and had that revision done at, I think he was 1 month old. And that really did help. And then around that same time, we started working with a lactation consultant to help get him off of the nipple shield. And for the first few weeks after the tie, he could latch a little bit without the shield, but he was just so angry and he like did not enjoy latching without it. My nipples they're not inverted, but they were like shorter, so he was used to this nice long nipple of the bottle or the nipple shield. So then he just struggled a lot to kind of get on and stay on. And it was still painful for me. So there was a lot of tears on his end, on mine end. Lots of crying, and it actually became like a very, like, it wasn't enjoyable anymore. So when it wasn't enjoyable and he was having a hard day, I was having a hard day, I would just pump and give a bottle. And then at some point, I don't even know when because everything blurs together, probably around month 2, I realized like, hey, I've gone all day and I haven't pumped or given a bottle. Like he's been breastfeeding all day. And at some point, it just became easier to breastfeed him with the nipple shield than it did to pump and give a bottle. Which was like, I was like, yay, like we're slowly getting there. Yeah. We still did bottles at nighttime because we found he slept better when he had a bottle than when he breastfed. And then also that way my husband could participate. But it was a struggle still. Like we would have a good week where he would latch well. And then all of a sudden 1 week, like he hated the boob. He did not like latching. He would scream and cry. There was even a period around like 4.5 months where he would only nurse if he was asleep. So then I would like rock him to sleep with a pacifier and then I would pull the pacifier out and like swap it with my nipple and then he would eat. So he was like only nursing when he was asleep and then like I also
dream feeding.
Yeah. And then I would have to hold him. So like it was nice. We would do naps and feeding all together at once, but it was hard because I was like, he hates my boobies. Like it was actually like mentally very difficult because I'm like, I'm going through all of this to feed you and like I felt rejected. I think that's what it was. That I'm like, and then you go down the like spiral of like, this is easy for so many other people. Like, why is this not easy for us? And why does he not enjoy breastfeeding? And
you also put a lot of work into it. Like you were working really hard.
Yeah.
And so to not see the results was
difficult. It was like emotionally and mentally draining. But then we would have these few great days and it went well. And I'm like, okay, we're turning a corner. And then 1 week he'd be like, nope, I don't want to breastfeed.
Like dangling the carrot in front of you. Like it can happen. Like, look, it's there. Yeah. Like we're so close.
And I don't know, actually, I do know what changed it. Around 5.5 months, he went through like a wicked sleep regression. So for a few nights, we decided to co-sleep. And he did a lot of nursing at night during those few nights. And then it was like a switch flicked in his brain. And all of a sudden, he was like, yeah, like breastfeeding, I love it. And since then, he just loved it. And he really enjoys breastfeeding now. Like he's actually, I can like feed him for comfort. Before that, like there was no nursing for comfort. It was like something he needed to get comfort for. Like I would like try to feed him and he'd be like, yes, and then I'd have to comfort him other ways. So it was nice. And now he actually like enjoys it. And if he like falls over and like cries, I'm like, let me breastfeed you like now, because we never had that experience in the first like 5.5 months. He never wanted it for comfort. And I think I missed this, but at some point from like month 2 to 5, we weaned off the nipple shield, and it was like a long, slow process where like it would work for a few days and then I would need it again. And then we'd be fine for a few days and then I needed it again. And then it was the same thing where all of a sudden I was like, oh, I haven't used it in like a week. Like, yay. Yeah, there was a lot, but you know what?
It was a journey.
We're going strong. We're 9 months. He is latching really well. We'll get to that later, but
yeah.
We're doing it. All right. So what about you, Jen, the first couple of months, what did feeding or breastfeeding look like?
So we continued triple feeding for
a long time,
probably longer than we should have for my mental well-being, but we kept working with a lactation consultant. So she came to our house twice, and then we had 2 office visits as well. So we did have lots of support, and like in between that was phone calls with her, and I could text her anytime, and so like we had lots of support.
She sounds great, by the way. So let's link her in the podcast in the comments. We'll make sure we give her a shout out.
I can't think of the company name right now, but anyways, we'll link her. She's great, Tracy.
Tracy,
not the same Tracy.
Oh,
not your Tracy.
So many different Tracy's.
Different Tracy. Yes. Anyway, so we did triple feeding for a long time. And something I do want to point out is that in those kind of like the lessons we were having, I actually had to get my husband to learn how to do like the hand expression, because my hands would cramp. Like between trying to hold a baby and then trying to like express, my hands would get like numb. They'd go to sleep. I'd get cramps and I just couldn't. Like the entire 20 minutes on each side I was breastfeeding, I was hand expressing the entire time.
Yeah. That's exhausting.
Because this is the only way I was getting any milk out for her to get. And so, yeah, my hands were exhausted and cramping. And so she actually taught Nanette how to do it so that it could be helpful to me and I could have a little bit of a break. I mean, a break. Like, I'm still breastfeeding, but at least my hands got a little bit of a break.
It's like, you know when somebody stands behind you and they act as your arms?
Yes.
It's like that.
That's what Dad was doing. He was acting as that. So he learned how to, like, help with the hand expression, which was super helpful. And I also finally got a breastfeeding pillow.
Oh, life-changing.
I got my breast. I can't even
Did you have the one that clipped behind you?
Yes, my breast friend. That's really hard to say. It's not my breast friend. Anyways, I was like, I don't need it. Like, I'm strong. I work out. I got muscles. How hard is it to, like, hold your baby? But when you're doing this
and you're trying to do it on the ball.
It was exhausting. Yeah. So I finally got one of those, and that was game changer, getting the pillow for us. So between that and Nanette helping, we just triple fed for a long time. And then finally my mental health, and in consultation with the lactation consultant, we're like, you know what? I think my milk is just not, I just don't have a supply. Like, for whatever reason, it was not increasing at all. Like, we were seeing no change with all of the work we were doing every 2 to 3 hours. Like, there was no change. She also had the tongue tie. We got the revision done, but latching wasn't her problem. It was the supply that was the issue. So the tongue tie, it didn't really factor in because she was always latching okay. But anyways, that was just an aside, something else that we did during that time.
That's actually how we became friends, over the tongue ties.
So we finally switched to, I was just pumping, and we were just giving her whatever I pumped. She would eat that during the day, and then the rest was supplemented with formula.
Do you remember when you made that switch, when you got rid of the attempting to latch?
Like 3 to 4 months, I think, is when we stopped. Like, we kind of gave up the feeding portion of triple feeding and just did the pumping and the bottle. And then the rest was formula. And then eventually I was pumping for like hours a day and getting half an ounce, maybe not even a quarter of an ounce. Like, for the amount of time that I was pumping, I was getting the smallest amount.
The reward was not.
And eventually I was just like, I can't sustain this. And I read all these things about, like, you know, 1 teaspoon of breast milk has however many good antibodies and all these nutrients and stuff in it. But I could not sustain pumping for hours a day to get that little. Like, it was just too damaging on my mental health. So we made the decision to actually stop pumping altogether, and we went to formula 100% exclusively. And that was probably month like 4 to 5. No, maybe it was closer to month 6, because I remember thinking, like, I got close to 6 months. Like, well, we'll call it good, kind of thing. But yeah, we triple fed, and then I pumped for probably longer than I should. But we tried. I tried everything.
You did. You gave it a real college try.
Did not work. And I have to say again, the lactation, she didn't pressure me at all. She was just like, you know what? You've tried hard. Like, pat yourself on the back. We have done everything that I can think of for you. And it's just not working.
Just wasn't
so
working.
She was like, I can help you transition to bottle feeding. Luckily, Jordan liked taking a bottle because we'd kind of done that from the start. And so we had no issues doing that. And
yeah,
we got a baby Brezza, and it changed our life.
Your life. Can you talk a little bit about, like, how it felt when you were putting in all of this effort and you weren't getting the outcome that you wanted?
Oh, it's just so, it just knocks you down. Like, you just feel like crap all the time, and you're trying so hard, and for everyone else it's working. So you think something is wrong with you, and like, why isn't this working for me? Like, I am putting effort in. Why is this effort not getting a reward? Like, why I'm trying so hard. Everything
the amount
else
of effort you're putting in is not actually...
you work hard for something, you get it. Like, I worked hard and studied a lot, I got good grades. I tried hard in things in sports, and I did well and got MVP. I, went to the gym, I got faster. I went to the gym, I got stronger. Like, you tried, and then you got these things. So I just thought, I am trying so hard, it should work, and it didn't. And it was very, like, I was a failure. Yeah. I was this weak person. I was not, like, I was so down on myself.
But really, you were, like, the opposite of that. But when you're in that, that's all you see. Where, like, the amount of effort you were putting in was not, like, the outcome was not reflected.
Based on effort. Yeah. The effort did not correlate with the outcome by any means. And so, which is important to know. Like, you tried so hard for months, and it took you till month 5 or 6 till it finally got better. And you had to put in so much work. And for me, I put in all this work, and it didn't get better.
Yeah.
But your mental health has to be taken into account, because it matters.
Yeah.
Like,
we were talking about this before. Like, of course, there's benefits to breast milk.
Yes. You
can't make the antibody. I don't know. Maybe somebody one day will. That'd be great. But you can't like your mental health is so important. And people think, oh, but like the benefits of breast milk. Well, you know what also is really good for your baby? Having a present mom who isn't crying and also isn't pumping 30 hours a day.
Yep. You need to be present and actually
you can't actually pump 30 hours a day,
but
yeah, that's the joke. That's the joke. But you actually, like, you can allow it to, and it did happen for both of us, but you can allow it to kind of take away your joy, take away energy that you could be putting towards creating a bond with your baby. And that's not the point of breastfeeding.
Yes.
Like you can't, it's very hard to not let it affect your mental health, but that's why it's important to have this conversation with your support before, because when you get yourself into that spiral, into that hole where like it has to work out, or I'm not a good mom, like, no, that's not the truth.
Yes.
You can be an amazing mom no matter how your baby is fed, but you have to prioritize your mental health for that. And it's hard. It's so hard because you feel like a failure. You feel like it's not working. Even I felt like I was failing, and I was giving breast milk, but I was not always giving it straight from the tap. Like how was that failing? How is it failing when you were putting in literally hours a day of pumping and trying, and you actually found your own resources and paid for them to come into your house, and you were triple feeding for months. Like, how was that
for the lactation consultant? We should say, like, some people's benefits do have coverage for lactation support,
but not where we live,
and with certain specialists as well. Like, they have to be certified under certain things, but we both didn't have those. So like I paid a lot of money out of pocket to have her come, because I really wanted to. I just told myself I'd give it a fair shot, and for me that meant
you gave it
getting
much more than a fair shot,
and it just didn't work. But I should say also that we are exclusively still using formula, but we also use donated breast milk, which if you would have asked me before the baby came, I would have been like, that's gross. I'm not going to use someone else's breast milk and put it in my baby. Like, that to me just,
it feels weird until you're
I knew other people who had done it, and I was always internally like, this is kind of weird. Like,
it feels weird.
I just couldn't do it. But then I had a baby and I couldn't breastfeed, and I went to formula, and I knew people like Karlee who had a very good supply that offered me breast milk, and I was kind of like, why wouldn't I say yes? Like, it's beneficial for my daughter. There's a lot more antibodies.
And like I'm feeding it to my baby. Like, I know it's legit. She was going through some colds
and got COVID, and so I was like, you know what, this would actually be really good, because she's been fighting illness, and which is just even better in those times to have breast milk, just because of the added nutrients and antibodies. So I was like, what? Why wouldn't I? Why am I letting my like weird pride get in the way of accepting help that is good for my child?
And I think that was actually when you were able to stop pumping.
Yes.
Because you had a goal of giving a little bit of breast milk for X amount of months. So I had like casually mentioned, by the way, I have some extra, I'm going to be posting it on Facebook. So if any of you are interested. And then like a few days later, I think you were like, okay, like actually I think I'm interested because I'm ready to stop pumping, but I want to give a little bit every day.
Yes.
And I think you were saying like it felt like weird and gross at first thinking about having someone else's breast milk. And this goes back to like society. A lot of people in society or society as a whole tells us breastfeeding is yucky and gross and ew. And breast milk is a biohazard, and oh my god, you can't spill breast milk on anything. Actually, no.
It's actually very, very beneficial.
Yes, the WHO actually considers breast milk like a food source, not like a hazardous material. So you can store it in the fridge at work, where your coworkers also store their lunch, and that's fine.
Yeah.
According to the World Health Organization, that's kosher. So like it's not this yucky, gross thing. But you don't really know that or really understand that until you have a baby, and then, well, maybe you still think it's yucky and gross, but
and you know what,
it's
you
food.
are entitled to your, like, if that to you is just something you can't get on board with,
of course,
that's
the
fine.
sharing. But like breast milk in general is not yucky and gross.
Yeah.
But if the sharing is not for you, and you know what, we do recommend sharing or like taking it from somebody you know.
It is just, it made me feel better. And like, we would do gratitude, my husband and I, at the end of every night, we do a gratitude that we just say something that kind of went well, we were proud of, or whatever, we're grateful. And more than once, we were like, we're grateful for Karlee's boobs that gave us this milk so we could feed our daughter a little bit of breast milk and get her through COVID and get her through these kind of colds that she kept having and stomach issues. And it did help. It helped clear up some of those things. So it was great, but it's also a mom friend. Like, how great is it that I had this community that I met and that I could do all these things. We were sharing toys, like help with what pacifiers.
Clothes,
I got a pack of 4. Do you want to split it? And you can have 2. Like, we shared all these things because there's so many different types of bottles. Yeah, we were sharing the wide nipple, the narrow, whatever. So we were sharing like the different types, and like we were doing all this to sharing different pacifiers because they all have different shapes. And so we were sharing all of this already. So, like, it was just another
Why
thing,
not
like,
share your
another
milk?
benefit of having mom friends is that I had this resource, and I used milk other than Karlee's as well from another mom friend, and it's just really awesome when you can have that support that's really there for you in a non-judgmental way. Like, they wouldn't have cared if I said no. They weren't pressuring me that I had to give her breast milk at all. I
offered it to people who then didn't want it, and like, I don't even, like, now that I've had a baby, I would accept breast milk from somebody, but before, I was the same. I was like,
it just sounds kind of funny when when you first think about it, but when you're in it, it's not weird at all.
Not weird at all. So definitely consider that as an option. Yes. If you either don't make enough, you're having issues with latching or supply, then that is an option. You can reach out to your mom friends or your community and see if anybody has any. And the same thing goes if you do have a freezer full of breast milk that you may not be using. You can actually reach out to your mom friends and say, hey, I have some extra breast milk if anybody needs it. You can post it on Facebook. I actually had somebody come up and pick up like hundreds of ounces for her. Her kid was a little older, closer to 2, but they were having surgery and they were worried, and I was like, yeah, it's gonna go to waste, like I can't. So
once your breastfeeding journey really started to pick up, it was easier to let go of this,
exactly
like, collection you had in the fridge, right?
Because at first I was like, well, I may need this, but it's kind of saving it for a rainy day.
A couple more questions we'll try to get through here. So when or if did you have to change your expectations?
Literally the entire way. And I kept having to change it and remind myself of not even my expectations, but like what is not like acceptable, but like what's
actually important.
Important, yeah. But the main one was when we were in NICU, and I was like, hey, I cannot handle this screaming. And I felt like I was torturing him. Like I was like, we will get there with latching. I can't, this is not a priority right now. The priority right now is us, like him getting out of the NICU, getting home, getting settled, and that he's being fed. So we had to do a full shift. Well, not we, I did, because my husband was like, you're the boss in this, like whatever you want to do. But yeah, that was the main one. What about you, Jen? When did you have to change your expectations?
Mine was when I think I first kind of was like, I don't think I'm getting really any milk. Like, I don't think this is working.
You're like, wait a second.
I kind of was like, no, I'll just work hard and it's gonna work. Like, I'm just gonna work hard and it's gonna work. So I think when I finally stopped doing the triple feeding and I finally kind of went down to not a lot of pumping, and that reality check of just like, I can't outwork this. I can't work harder and make it work. It's not gonna happen. And so that was the biggest kind of reality check I had to do. And it was the best thing for my mental health. And then I could actually, enjoy and spend a lot more time, like quality time with my child, as opposed to spending the time pumping and
you didn't have it here.
Just not being happy and washing pump parts and like, I actually like flashbacks hearing the noise now. Karlee will pump sometimes and I'm here and I'm just like, like that noise.
It's like noise on or nails on the chalkboard.
Triggers me, but
it is. And we have the same pump, so it's the same noise.
I know, exactly the same, but yeah. And then did you use lactation support? This is the last question.
Yeah. So my midwife, one of them is actually a lactation consultant. And then also in the hospital, I saw a lactation consultant. And then we also hired one when he had his tongue tie as well.
Yes.
And then I also did watch like a lot of YouTube videos and Instagram pages. And like, this is something I do as part of my job, but I still needed support because it's different when it's your own. And like, every situation is different. So I was learning about nipple shields and weaning off of them. And I joined like an exclusive pumping page on Facebook because for a while I was like, maybe I'll just pump. And you got to dive into your situation, and lots of good learning out there. Yeah. What about you, Jen? Did you use any lactation
basically
consult?
Just answered this question throughout. But so I had 4 sessions. 2, she came to my home, which is like highly recommended in the first like couple of weeks. It is, you don't want to leave the house, let alone to go like take your boobs out and try, like it's so much easier when they can come to your house. So highly recommend that. Definitely. And then we went to her office a couple more times after that, but then we had phone and like texting support and stuff throughout it as well. So lots of support in the first kind of like 4-ish months, I would say. But I also just watched a lot of videos. Like I found some accounts that I really liked that talked about hand expression, how to collect, like if you're having issues, flange sizing, like there's so much to breastfeeding that I just didn't know about, so I learned a lot.
And then the baby side of things, like tongue ties, and they can have like neck things if they're
we went to a chiropractor, like we did all sorts of other supports as well. But I think just the main part is kind of to summarize all of this is like we had very different journeys, but we both have very happy, healthy babies that are their own size, like they're growing on their own curve, but they're doing really well. And It's going to look different for everyone, but listening to other people's journeys and knowing you're not alone in your struggle is also very important, because I think
Definitely.
the people that can naturally just have a baby and breastfeed is actually not that common.
So
That's what society
uncommon.
makes you think is normal, and the common is that you're just going to be able to do it, but
it's not.
It's not. And something I learned from Karlee, actually, like Nurse Karlee told me this, is that, well, every pregnancy is different. Like, your ability to breastfeed might change from birth to birth. So I don't know what's going to happen with the second baby, but that you can actually grow more milk ducts, right?
Yeah, more glandular tissue. So like the gland, it's a hard word, glandular, but the actual tissue in your breast that, like, not the fatty tissue, the one that's actually for milk supply, you grow more of it with every pregnancy.
So if you struggled on pregnancy, you might have a better second one. Like, you don't know.
And then on top of that, you're also more comfortable. There's like that, like your whole,
Yes.
you have more experience, but
Yes.
then like anatomically, your body can actually make more milk with every pregnancy.
Yes. So it is hard, and it's just, it's good to listen to other people's experiences. Know you're not alone. If you are just breastfeeding, if you are pumping and giving bottles, like exclusively pumping, so 100% of the time pumping, if you're doing half pumping, half formula all the way, like, there's such a big spectrum of how you can feed your child. You just need to make sure you're feeding your child.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know fed is best is said all the time, but it's true. You want your baby to just be healthy and growing. Like,
for sure. When the kids go to kindergarten, nobody's going to be like, what brand of formula did you have?
Like no one is going to care what or how much formula, or like, no one is going to care. It's all going to work out in the end.
All going to work out. And the most important is taking care of yourself.
Yeah, your mental health has to be in this equation. And if you try to be like, no, it doesn't matter, I can suffer as long as my baby is getting breast milk, like that's not healthy. And so we really want to emphasize that you need to take your mental health into account. And your spouse may have opinions, but doesn't matter. In our minds, it really doesn't matter. They should want what's best for the baby and what's best for you.
Yeah.
And that means your mental health and your well-being.
And what's best for you is best for your baby.
Totally.
So, and also, they're your titties. So, you choose how you use them.
Yeah. If you don't want to breastfeed at all, that's also fine. Like,
definitely.
Try not to let society shame you into doing something that you're just not comfortable with.
Especially if you had if you had like a traumatizing relationship with it the first time around. It's okay if you just don't want to.
Yeah.
2 things before we sign off that I've been like sitting in the back of my head.
Go.
1, society is also not, like, the way our society functions is not conducive to breastfeeding. Mm-hmm. After a baby, all people want to do is visit. Do any of those people want to help you with breastfeeding? Not really. And
some are just like they kind of give you the look when you whip your boob out to breast. Well, no, if you're going to come see me, especially in the beginning, you're going to see boobs. Like, that's your problem, not mine.
This is like, it's like a spoon for my baby. Like, it's a straw. Like, I don't know. Like, it's not a breast. Like, it is a breast, but like, it's not sexual when I'm feeding my baby.
Feeding your baby.
Yes, like, exactly. And like, out and about, like, I've fed Henry in bathrooms. I've fed him a lot in the back of my car. Mm-hmm. Our society is not set up to support breastfeeding parents in any way at all, which is very frustrating, but that's a rant for another day. So that's 1. And 2, I just want to say, if your feeding journey did not go the way that you wanted, like, I'm sorry, because it's like emotional and you have to grieve it. So if it didn't go your way, like, give yourself the space to actually grieve it. And if people in your life are telling you like, oh, it's fine, fed is best. Yes, fed is best, but you're still allowed to be sad if your journey didn't work out the way that you had hoped or anticipated.
Totally.
Because it actually is like a little bit of a like, ugh, like right to the heart. Well, that was my uterus, but that's not even on the right side. Everywhere. Oh boy. Yeah.
No, it's very emotional. It
is.
There was a lot more of like a raw emotional connection to breastfeeding than I ever would have thought. And I was like weird about it in the beginning. I was just like, my boobs are like, I was weird about it. And then all of a sudden I was like, wow, this is actually like a very incredibly amazing, like, not spiritual, but it's
it can be. It's
like you have this weird like, not weird in
it's
a bad
like a
way,
biological drive to there's
just so much to it. So
so
it's
many
okay
layers.
if you are sad that you can't do it the way you want. Like, that is totally normal, and you are allowed to be upset about it. And don't let your spouse or friends tell you like, it's okay,
like, it's
get over it.
Because
you're allowed to be upset.
Exactly. Like, they're right in the sense that like, we are going to feed this baby and that's the most important thing, but you're still allowed to be sad about it, especially if it was really important to you. Well, even if it wasn't important to you, if you're sad, just be sad. You're allowed to be sad.
So let's wrap this up with our Mom Day mantra.
Let's do it.
Go ahead.
I want you to say it today.
Okay. Our Mom Day mantra today is, your worth as a mother is not tied to how you feed your baby.
Say it again for the cheap seats in the back.
Your worth as a mother is not tied to how you feed your baby.
100%.
You're not better because you can breastfeed.
No.
You're not better because of anything. Like, your relationship with your child is really what matters.
Most important.
Like, that is actually being there and loving them and supporting them. Like, that's the most important thing. That's what makes you a good mother, not how you feed your child.
100%. How you show up for your baby, how you, like, it's just, there's so many more important things.
Yeah.
You know?
We recognize that there's just a lot of shame and societal pressures that come into play, but
there's a lot of holier than thou. Yeah.
Yes.
At the end of the day, that doesn't matter.
How you feed your baby.
How you feed your butt. How you feed your butt. How you feed your baby's butt.
Mom brain, pregnancy brain, it's all just...
Yeah, all your little slips are always have to do with butts. The rectum one and baby's butt. But it's Jen's right.
Weird correlation. But yeah, subconsciously, a therapist would tell me subconsciously I'm thinking about butts all the time or something. I don't know. Anyways, we can cut all this out.
I'm the one that edits. I'm keeping it in.
Anyways, if you like listening to our podcast, we would really appreciate if you leave us a review. Tell us what you liked, what you want to hear us talk about. Like, we would just love any feedback. So if that's on YouTube or any of the podcasting platforms that we stream on, that would be great.
That would be very helpful because then we can tell other moms about butts.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you next week. Happy Mom Day.
Happy Mom Day.